Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar entitled The Good, the Bad and the Ugly of Non-Verbal Communication. I've been asked more and more to speak about non-verbal communication as a standalone topic, as a standalone workshop. And yesterday I was in Tom Price and I was teaching people, businesses, how to pitch for business. And one of the things is that they'll have a beautiful script, they'll have everything written down, all the dollars, all the value proposition. And then when Rio Tinto asks you to come in and present your proposal live, 15 minutes, to a group of decision makers, of procurement managers, a lot of people fall to bits and their non-verbal communication detracts from their very pitch, their very sales presentation. And that's just the sales pitch in everyday life, from job interview, from taking on a leadership role. Your non-verbal communication is so important, as it is with public speaking, which is the main area that I work in. So welcome everybody. Welcome Christine, welcome Murray, Sarah, Stephen. We've just got underway. As normal with my webinars, please ask questions as we go in the question dialogue box. Don't wait for me to stop and pause. Take notes. Ask questions after the webinar. Maybe in your life, in your career, somebody makes a comment and you'd like me to provide clarity or deal with something. You have a habit, a non-verbal habit that you'd like to deal with. I can help you with that. So feel free to email me, ask me questions afterwards. But most importantly, I want you to start looking at other speakers and watching what they do non-verbally, and also at yourself. How can you check your own non-verbals? Get someone to video record what you're doing. Hand someone your mobile phone and get them to do some video recording. Practice in front of a mirror. Ask someone to give you specific feedback on how your non-verbal communication is going. So specifically today I'm going to talk about stance, gestures, use of the platform. So the platform is the stage, the front of the room, your eyes, your eye contact, and a little bit around your voice. All of that in 30 minutes. So clearly I'll be just touching on things, and if you need me to go really deep with some science behind any of this, then maybe we need to do that via email. I'll do the best I can. So first of all, the stance. There's stances to avoid, and this is what I saw last night in Tom Price when I asked people to stand up and introduce themselves. A lot of passive stances, from fig leaves, from holding hands around the groin, to crossing over legs and shrinking up. When you walk into a room, what does your immediate stance and your nonverbal communication say about you? Please avoid those passive stances. I'm a little bit reticent to say anything about hands in your pockets. I'm not going to say that this gentleman's wrong. It's not just the hands in the pockets. This young lady is shrinking up. And I'm sure you've seen the TED Talk by Amy Cuddy, and she talks about how your body language determines who you are. And she also discusses the science. While if you go to a Toastmasters or a public speaking trainer, they'll probably tell you don't put hands in your pockets. The reality is the highest paid speaker in the world, Anthony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within, walks on stage for 2 days, 3 days, hands in pockets, and just has a chat with you. So very natural and not necessarily passive. These ones, this is called the fig leaf. This one is a little bit of navel gazing and, just fingers pointing down a little bit in terms of being passive. And sometimes the crossed legs, I see that as well. That is another example of a passive stance. So you're walking in to present. You're walking into a job interview. You're walking into a meeting to pitch your idea, your sales presentation. Please avoid being passive. So a neutral and confident stance, generally we say if your hands are around your belly button, and when your hands are around your belly button, that means they should be parallel to the floor. So they're parallel. As soon as your hands, if this is the floor, as soon as your hands drop down to a fig leaf, then they're no longer parallel. This gentleman here, his hands are indeed in line with the floor. You could bring them up even a little bit higher. That would not hurt at all. This lady is very confident. She's making eye contact while pointing at the flip chart. If you would like a mentor, if you would like someone to follow in terms of good, neutral, but confident, not neutral passive, neutral confident, watch your weather presenters. And the weather presenters, of course, hold their hands around their midriff parallel to the ground, and then they point to a synoptic chart, cyclone forming off the northwest of West Australia. They have their little clicker in their hand, and they still bring that back near their midriff parallel to the ground. They're taught to do that. That's seen as looking not overpowering and not passive. There are, of course, aggressive stances. Aggressive stances are when you put your hips on your shoulder, your hands on your hips, when your arms are crossed over in front of you. This is sometimes seen as closed, and hands behind back walking across the stage is often referred to as the sergeant major. All gestures are valid if they relate to what you're talking about. So feeling confronted by a situation that you're describing as part of your story, and I really felt confronted, this is an appropriate congruent gesture. Now, I'm talking about you as a presenter, presenting, pitching, speaking, going for a job interview. If you're in a room of 50 people and you notice everyone is sitting with their arms like this, do not assume they're closed to your ideas. The reality is this is a very, very comfortable way of sitting. What I'm saying is avoid it as your resting position when you are speaking, addressing a meeting, doing a presentation, or going to a job interview. All right. Any questions on that? On your stance? Confident people know how to walk into a room. They stand up, feet slightly apart. They have this presence, and Amy Cuddy talks about presence. Her best-selling book is about presence. They have that presence that shows they're confident, they want to be here, and they're not shrinking violets. They're not afraid. So that's passive, that's neutral. Some other neutral positions, I try and get people to not lean on a lectern. This is called the lectern lean. Other people sometimes grasp the lectern really tight and their knuckles go white. It's called white knuckle fever. I'm going to talk about the platform later on. One of the things that I encourage you is to get away from the lectern. So this young lady here may not initially, this may be fine. But if she's presenting for 50 minutes, 45 minutes, and the entire time is spent behind the lectern, I'd encourage her to stand out. And this is a photo of me presenting. No barriers, no lecterns. You can see all of me, nowhere to hide. It shows authenticity. It shows a willingness to be vulnerable. And the lectern is just that little bit of, safety. I feel safe here. And the lectern lean, avoid the lectern lean. All right, so that's stance. practice walking into a room confidently, owning the stage, owning the platform, showing people that you want to be there. Even if you are feeling nervous, your non-verbal communication can echo your confidence, can echo that you're ready to present, you're ready to pitch, you're ready to stake your claim for that job interview. Some science out of Stanford University where they put on a skull cap and do an EEG. So this is an electroencephalograph. We all know about the ECG. They test your heart for the electrocardiograph. And EEG is an electroencephalograph, brain waves. A speaker goes into two different groups of people and he tells the truth on both. The first one, he goes in, he's aligned non-verbally, he tells the truth, his body language shows that he agrees with what he's saying. He then goes to another audience, tells the truth, 100% truth, but he puts his body language away. He goes into a passive stance. He flattens his voice and has no emotion whatsoever as he says, I'm really excited to be here today. And yeah, this is the highlight of my week, speaking to you guys on the webinar. Really happy to be here. And the EEG pattern changes and they don't believe him, even though the message is the same. They're both honest and truthful messages. I haven't read about someone telling a lie and using their nonverbal communication to echo the lie, but I think other physiology, breathing and sweating and those things sometimes gives the lie away. The power of your nonverbal communication. Your gestures, make them purposeful and congruent, aligned with what you're saying. This is the EEG research. While your gestures are not aligned, are not congruent, are not amplifying the words coming out of your mouth, then your message may be diluted. Some gestures to avoid. These are those bouncy and repetitive gestures that people do over and over again for no real reason other than maybe I feel like I'm conducting an orchestra. Our previous Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, many of the videos that I watched him, his hands are going up and down as he speaks in time with what he's saying. Towards the latter end of his prime ministership, I noticed that the videographers, the video cameras, were just taking head and shoulders. So now you're just seeing my head and shoulders, and my hands are flapping up and down below, but they're not distracting you. This is called noise. If you're an auditory learner and someone's telephone rings in the background when someone's speaking, you're going to be distracted. That's going to annoy you. Who's got that phone on? That is really disrespectful. If you're a visual learner and you like to watch what's happening, the bounce up and down for no reason, the rubbing of the hands round and round and round for no reason is a visual noise, the same as the mobile phone. In my workshops, I teach people how to do the frozen hand gesture. So you make your gesture, whatever that may be, moving people from one way of thinking, maybe to another way of thinking, layering the learning one step at a time. Then you freeze it. You don't just do the bounce, so layering the learning or moving people from one way of thinking to another way. It's the bounce can be really distracting. Do you have noisy gestures? This particular gesture here, the pointing. Female audiences around the world are sick and tired of men who point. It's yours. You should do it. I don't agree. What do you think? We need to stop pointing as a gesture when we're speaking, when we're facilitating, when we're running a seminar. What is your default gestures say about you? Distracting movements on the platform. I spoke about the lectern and avoiding standing behind the lectern, so I then encourage people to get away from the lectern. So as they move away from the lectern and they stand out here, they then do some distracting movements. And there's a whole range of what I call speakers waltzes. They do a little 4-step, they stand here, take 1 step there, move forward 1 step, then back, then take a step back. There should be some music playing, I think. And this is there. Or, back 2 steps, forward 2 steps, back 2 steps, forward 2 steps, back 2 steps, forward 2 steps. When you move away from the platform, it's best to anchor your feet. Think of your feet as tree trunks. Plant them on the floor at a distance apart that you're comfortable with, generally no wider than the shoulders. When you go a really wide stance, that's seen as aggressive. And then you uproot these tree trunks. You move or uproot your feet for a purpose. To engage a different part of the audience, to go to a flip chart, to a whiteboard, to hand out some handouts. So you're using the platform for purpose. Don't bring anything that you don't need up to the platform. Be careful what you don't need. I mentioned I've just come back from Tom Price. Let's see if I can get my glasses off with my headset. I see a lot of mining people with their safety glasses sitting on the top of their head. They don't need them. They're inside. They're doing a safety meeting or a pre-start, and the sun is dancing around on the sunglasses. It's a little bit distracting. And of course, one of my favorites. If you don't need it, don't bring it up. Not to mention the noise of the clicking, but the other things that we can do. So be aware of distracting movements on the platform. And of course, the cat on a hot tin roof. This is the incessant walker. This is the person. So it's one of the dances, one of the waltzes, but it is from left to right, turn and back. It's not left, settle, spend a couple of minutes there, then move to the middle, settle, spend a couple of minutes there, and then move across and settle and move a couple of minutes there. It's incessantly walking back and forth. A few years ago, I went to a presentation by Bob Geldof, Sir Bob Geldof. He was in Perth last week, recently. But for the 90 minutes that Bob Geldof spoke, he just walked back and forward for the whole 90 minutes. I've worked out the secret to his staying very thin and very fit. He walks so much on stage, but it can be distracting to your audience. Little dances, cross steps, yeah. Move on stage and just settle. Eye contact, really important. I like to have conversations with people. The way I have conversations is I make eye contact with you. I have a chat to you. When there's 50 people in the room, I don't scan the 50 people. I don't look above their head. I will pick an individual and speak to them for 2 to 3 seconds. Then I'll randomly pick someone else, speak to them for 2 to 3 seconds. Then I'll go down the back of the room, speak to them for 2 to 3 seconds. So I'm actually having mini conversations with all 50 people in the room. Glancing at the wall, the ceiling, the floor, it's probably best to avoid that. It comes down to trust. We're really looking to build rapport and connect with our audience, with our interview panel, with the meeting we're pitching to. It's our eye contact that we convey that authenticity, that trust. The other thing with eye contact, not today, you're all in virtual land, but in a live audience at a job interview, I can see what's happening to the people I'm speaking to. And if the job interview panel falls asleep or shakes their head, or you losing them, you as the interviewee have the opportunity to increase the energy, ask them to clarify the question. Same with the audience. If you say something and everyone in the audience shakes their head, you've lost the audience. One of the mistakes would be to then plow on with your proposition, to plow on with your topic, regardless. When I see I've lost the audience, I will take a step back and acknowledge that not everyone's going to agree with me, and I'll find some common ground. And then when I start to see a few nods, okay, fair enough, we'll give you that, Peter. We'll allow you we'll allow you at least the opportunity to explore your ideas. Now that I've got the nods, I notice they're breathing low and steadily. I can now move on to my difficult topic, or my confronting issue, or my left field idea. If you're looking at the roof or the floor or the walls, you don't get to see or to read what's happening for your audience. So eye contact is really, really important as a speaker. Sometimes when we think, so if I'm thinking about what am I going to be doing in 3 years' time, my eyes will tend to go up as I search for the future. You want to know what it was like growing up in Denmark in the south of WA, farmer's son? My eyes will tend to go down as I try and find that. When you're doing job interviews and speaking, don't try to avoid that as much as you can. The answer may be there, or the answer may be there, but try and make straight on eye contact with the people in the room. Are there any questions on that so far? How do you make eye contact when there's 200 people in the room? Really good question. I mentioned the 50. I do mini conversations with 50. So let's go to a bigger room, and let's go 500. So you're speaking down the front, and you've got rows and rows and rows and rows of audience, and you've got your 500 people. So what I would do is I use one of these models. It's either a Z, excuse my squiggly pen, or I can do an X, and the other one is a W or an M, whichever way you want. So I'm going to make eye contact here for 2 or 3 seconds. Then I'm going to move randomly across 2 or 3 seconds there, find a finishing point there. It doesn't have to be the edge of the room, 2 or 3 seconds. Move there 2 or 3 seconds, 2 or 3 seconds, down the back, 2 or 3 seconds, and then so that might take me 2 or 3 minutes of speaking, and then randomly choose somewhere else and do the same thing. Instead of starting here, I'll start somewhere else. So I'm going to pick other points. So remember, this is a big room with 500 people. And when I make eye contact with this person here down the back, I make eye contact with him. I genuinely look at him and make eye contact. I probably can't even see much of him. The beauty of this is that the 10 people sitting around that person feel that you're making eye contact with them. So you don't have to identify 500 people. You just have to use one of the patterns. But when you make eye contact, when you spend a few moments, pick out an individual and speak to them. Then pick out another individual and speak to them. And then someone else and speak to them for a few seconds. So thanks for that question. So make genuine eye contact. It's authentic. It's not looking above their head. It's not visualize here. I'm really nervous. I've been told to look above people's heads. Don't. Make real eye contact. Here's the truth. Every person in that room, in that seminar, wants to walk out feeling like Peter has had a chat to them, feeling like Murray has been speaking to them as an individual. Not that you've been standing there lecturing to them, not that you've been teaching them how to suck eggs, but you've actually had a one-on-one conversation. So with the 50, 100, 500 people, these patterns that you can use help you distribute your eye contact in a genuine and authentic way to all those people in the room. Moving along quickly, about 5 minutes left. Voice, use pause. Pause is really valuable. Pause helps eliminate those filler words. So what I want to talk about next, so what I think we need here, so, and the pause or silent sounds so much more confident, more credible, more intelligent. Pause can also punctuate and create the suspense in your presentation. Does that make sense? The pause can also punctuate and increase the importance of what you're saying. Now, I just demonstrated something then. I'm not sure if you picked it up, but the pre-pause, so the pause before something you say. So what I'm going to say next is really, really important. Clearly, I've got to say something important next, don't I? But I've got nothing. But you see what I mean. So the pre-pause elevates the importance of what you're going to say next. Does that make sense? That's the post-pause. When you pause after saying something important, profound, which you think is a key takeaway, shut up and let people take it in. That's called the post-pause. And I use pauses all the time. As I get older, I find I'm standing before audiences and my mind goes blank. My mind goes blank. I got nothing. The thing is, nobody knows that I've got nothing, and I just pause and stay there. And within 2 to 3 seconds, I recover. Breathe, deep breathing. I like this neutral position around my midriff, and when I'm speaking in front of 500 people, I get really nervous. So not quite up here, but down around my belly button. If my hand's not moving in and out in my resting position, then I'm not breathing. One of the things I do to control nerves is to do some meditation, deep breathing, relaxation before I go on stage. And as the MC announces our next speaker is, then I get that deep breathing going really well. And then as I get comfortable, I can bring my hands more away from my resting position and start to do the gestures that will add value to what I'm saying. Pace, volume, pitch, change the speed. The pause helps do that. The pause helps to punctuate. I don't have a radio quality voice. I'm not John Laws. So I need to use these techniques to increase my vocal variety. So in summary, as we wrap up, stance, avoid passive, avoid aggressive, find that neutral, confident stance when you walk on stage, avoid going behind the lecture, behind the lectern. Are my gestures noisy, bouncy? Do they not mean anything? Are they just repetitive that I'm doing for the fun of it? Or do they add value to the words coming out of my mouth? Are they smooth? Are they confident? And are they parallel or congruent to the words coming out of my mouth? The platform, don't do distracting movements, little dances, 4 steps, pacing, walking on the hot tin roof. Use it for purpose, eye contact, genuine, authentic eye contact, and your voice, a whole range of techniques you can use for your voice. Wrapping up, a range of workshops happening. We're in Bendigo next week. Then we're up to Broome in May. I've got some workshops in April. Tomorrow I've got a winning presentation skills in Perth, and I know we've got someone from Darwin on the webinar. Darwin, we've booked in Darwin for October again, so October Business Week. Next webinars, and this is the last time I'm using a platform called GoToWebinar or GoToMeetings. When you next participate in my webinar, you will see me trying to hopefully successfully, fingers crossed, use Zoom. Zoom is the platform that is taking the world in webinars and virtual meetings. So as of April, I will be running Zoom meetings, how to be more influential as a speaker, 4 sources of your influence, and 5 easy ways to add value to your seminar, your workshop, your presentation, so that the participants walk away not only feeling that you've had a chat with them, but with really good value. What does your nonverbal communication say about you? Be aware of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Get some feedback, video camera yourself, practice in front of a mirror, but don't let nonverbal communication sabotage your ability to be engaging at interview, at workshop, at presentation skills, and at meetings. Bye for now. This is Peter Dew, public speaking trainer and coach, signing out.